Hi everybody, welcome to the graphs that go along with perfect competition. So these graphs are put together in the order of the ideas that are presented in the textbook in chapter 24. So this is to review the different graphs, and we will be working our way in order through chapter 24. So to start out with, nice and easy, we will be thinking about the market. So in perfect competition, the market looks just like it does in every other market, the way that we studied it last year. You're going to have a equilibrium price and an equilibrium quantity that is reached. Now, because of the fact that we're talking about perfect competition, that means that the firm has to take the price that is created by the equilibrium in the market. So whatever the price is set in the market, which if we say that this price here was set at $4, then that becomes the price that the firm must offer for their products. So in this graph, which is now, we've moved from the market graph to the firm graph, this is going to be their marginal revenue, because every amount that they sell, regardless of the quantity, is going to be at the same price, which they have had to take from the equilibrium price set in the market. So just to remember, that means that we're dealing with this marginal revenue curve for the firm. Now, the other thing that we want to remember back from last semester is that we are going to be considering the idea of profit maximization. So now on this graph, we're going to be finding and showing the point of profit maximization and at what quantity that takes place. So what we want to remember back is what we just said, is that marginal revenue is going to be a straight line. But the other thing that we need to determine where is the point of profit maximization is the marginal cost curve. So remembering back, the marginal cost curve at first is going, the costs are lowering and then starting to rise again as quantity increases, due to, you guessed it, the law of diminishing marginal returns. But that is things that we've already covered. So getting back to the idea of profit maximization, where the marginal cost curve crosses the marginal revenue curve, where they meet, right here, we use that to determine the point of what quantity is our profit maximization quantity. So whenever you're given any type of problem and they ask, where is the firm producing, you use this to figure out the quantity that they are producing. Okay, so now we're going to put the two of them together. If we have a marginal revenue curve that is a straight line, and a marginal cost curve, what we want to consider is at what point are their costs equaling the amount of money that they're taking in. And that happens when all of these curves intersect at the same place. So when the marginal revenue curve is crossing the marginal cost curve at the low point of the ATC, right here, that is the profit maximization quantity for, I'm correcting my dashes. Okay, this is the profit maximization quantity for the firm, but it's also taking place at the low point of the ATC, and that is known as the break-even price for the firm. There's also another added benefit at that low point of the ATC. This low point of the ATC is also the most efficient point of production for the firm. So here we are bringing together a few different things and ideas that are presented in the chapter. That the break-even price for a firm in perfect competition is where it is at the low point of the ATC is also its most efficient point, because what we're seeing is that if they produced at a different quantity, if they produced at this quantity here, let's call this quantity 1 in comparison to quantity 2, at quantity 1 their cost of production is going to be higher. If they went further and they produced here, which is further along on the ATC, to quantity 3, their cost of production is higher than it is at the low point of the ATC. So there's a few things going on at the break-even price for the firm. Now, we added in the average total cost curve. What we want to also review is the shutdown price for the firm. So we are going to add a few things here, which we're going to put in the ATC, the marginal cost curve, and the other thing that we want to add is the average variable cost curve. So when the price that the firm can receive, which is determined by the market price, which we're going to draw in as the marginal revenue curve. At this point, the marginal revenue curve is intersecting the marginal cost curve at the same price as the average variable cost curve, which we see here. Now, we have two things going on here, because the marginal revenue curve is meeting the marginal cost curve here, so that means that this point right here is the point of profit maximization. So we're seeing that right there, right? That's our point of profit maximization. But so the very most profit that this firm can possibly make means that they're only covering their variable costs and they're not covering all of their costs. So at this point, if they reach this cost and point on the curve, this is known as the shutdown price, because if they're at this price or below, at any price, it makes no sense for the firm to continue to operate, because they are having to have greater losses by operating. So now we go on to a much more positive experience for this firm. We've been talking about break-even, which is zero economic profit. We've been talking about shutdown price. All of that is very depressing. So let's move on to a more positive time for this firm when they are experiencing a profit. So we start in the same way. We will be adding in the average total cost curve, the marginal cost curve, and then we're going to be saying at a point where they will be experiencing profit. So at the point where the marginal revenue curve crosses the marginal cost curve, that gives us their point of profit maximization, and then that means this is the price, right? At this quantity here, this is the cost. So for this firm to produce at this quantity, we can remember from December that we know that they're experiencing profit here, and this is per unit profit. The per unit profit is the vertical distance between the marginal revenue price and the ATC. And then to calculate total profit, they take the per unit profit, and we're going to multiply it by the quantity, which would be shown with the red slashed lines. This is total profit. So we did all of that last semester. So this is more for review. Okay, so then we're going to do the opposite. What's happening if a firm is experiencing a loss? So we have the same thing, right? ATC, marginal cost curve, and we're now going to draw in a marginal revenue curve. So at this point, marginal revenue, what we're seeing here is the marginal revenue curve is crossing the marginal cost curve at a price that is below their ATC. So this part right here, this vertical distance, is their loss. If we want to figure out the total loss, it would be this whole box, which is the per unit loss times the quantity produced at point of profit maximization. So now for this last part, we have to remember the idea that in perfect competition, firms can easily enter the market because of the assumptions of the model, that they're producing the same exact product, there's ease of entry, there's no barriers to entry, low startup costs, and so forth. So that brings us to the end of the chapter, which has to do with the long run. So if we have a situation where a firm is experiencing a profit, so something's happening here at the point of the firm, that is going to have an impact on the market. So what happens is that if you have a firm that is experiencing a profit, this is a powerful signal to the market. So this profit, as we just said, becomes this really powerful signal to the market that, hey, there are people here who are making profit. And so what would be a good thing is if you came to this market and tried to make profit as well. There's no barriers to entry, there's low startup costs, so it's easy for firms to enter the market. So that's what we're going to look at and see what happens. Okay, so what we have here now is we're showing that based on the market equilibrium and the market price, this firm is experiencing profit, which is shown here in red. So at the profit maximization point, they're experiencing profit. This profit is a powerful signal to the market. What this tells the market is you should join it. And what we have to go back now is to supply. One of the determinants of supply is numbers of suppliers in the market. So as more people join the market, supply will increase and shift out. And so what we'll see here is a shift in supply, creating a new market price, which now has to become the firm's price with a new marginal revenue. And what's happened is that marginal revenue has decreased. In this case, what I've drawn is that it's actually below the ATC, so this firm is experiencing a loss. What happens though in the long run is that firms will enter and exit, and the low point of the ATC becomes the point of long run equilibrium. So what we're going to draw in here is the point of long run equilibrium in perfect competition. So what we need again is the ATC. And then, because firms will enter and exit the market while there's the draw of either the profit, which is the attraction, or if people are experiencing a loss, they get out of the business. So in long run equilibrium for perfect competition is when the marginal revenue curve is intersecting the marginal cost curve at the low point of the ATC. And remember, we had looked at this at the beginning of this video, and we saw how the low point of the ATC was the most efficient point. So we have two things going on here. The low point of the ATC is both the long run equilibrium and the most efficient point for this market structure and for society in general, which we will see later on when we compare perfect competition to monopoly. So that takes us through all of the graphs of the chapter, and I hope that helps. And remember, with this new format, you might need to go back and reread the chapter again to be able to understand all of the graphs.